All right, it's 5 minutes after the hour of 7 o'clock. Welcome back to the Morning Brew here on CNC3. We go right across the Tobago to speak with the chairman of the Tobago Business Chamber, Martin George. Will there be any changes to the business community if the administration changes or remain the same? Good morning to you, Mr. George.
Hi, good morning to you, Natalie, and good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, and a special good morning to your listeners from all around the world and your viewers, and to the people of Tobago who will be participating in the elections today.
Oh, yes. Do you really believe, will there be a change? Any changes do you anticipate in Tobago if there is a change in administration, or if the administration remains the same?
Well, the thing is, from looking at the plans that have been laid out, and there haven't been that many that have been articulated in the platform, they seemed to, degenerate, I think, into usual pick-on and mudslinging and slander. But trying to pick sense from nonsense in terms of what the two major parties are saying, I think in terms of the PNM's platform, I saw that the Tracy Davidson Celestin, she indicated that they want to focus on digitization and agro industries and stuff like that. Now, the point is, these are things that we've heard before. One of the interesting things we heard from the PDP, and it has been an emphasis of Mr. Farley Augustine that he has said repeatedly, is that one of the first things they would like to do if they were to get into office would be to focus on intense internal audits of the THA. Now, when it comes to the question of accountability, Natalie, I think that really is something that both parties ought to be seriously focused on. Notwithstanding the attempts to disparage the Auditor General's report, I think it's something that we can't deny that over the years, the Auditor General has repeatedly indicated that the THA has not been very accountable. And to tie this back into the business question that you've asked, Natalie, the fact is, when one looks at the majority of Tobago's expenditure, it is on recurrent expenditure, it's on salaries, paying bills, paying wages, paying, things that crop up all the time. So there's very little infrastructural development that is taking place, little capital expenditure. So therefore, from a business perspective, we would love to see much more of the focus going towards capital development and infrastructural development, because these are the things which will facilitate a better business climate. Of course, there's a plus in that there's a new boat that has been commissioned, which is to start running soon, the APT James. And I think that would definitely help, along with its sister ship, the Boku Reef, when that comes online. So, of course, you must give kudos where kudos are due, and we are happy for that, because we've said repeatedly that what we want to see on that sea bridge is the double redundancy, whereby you always have a backup for a backup for a backup. So, in other words, there's always a ferry available with capacity. So any morning, Natalie and her friends decide, look, we want to go on a day trip to Tobago. You don't have to book in advance. You don't have to plan in advance. You just call each other and say, hey, let's head to the ferry in Port of Spain. We know we will get on. And that's what we want to ensure, that there is for that Tobago ferry service between Trinidad and Tobago.
But back to the business community and the idea of more capital being spent on more capital projects happening. How is that going to be possible, though? As you said, when we look at, 4.3% of the national budget, not even making that mark in terms of the amount of money is allocated to Tobago, and most of it, I would say, at least 85% of it would appear going towards recurrent expenditure. How is Tobago going to bridge that gap so that it has more money to treat with capital expenditure?
Well, the thing is, I think one of the things they would have to look at is ways of reducing the recurrent expenditure. Because when you look at some of the things, you look at how much money, just do an audit, into how much money the THA spends on rental properties, rental of vehicles, rental of equipment. It's a phenomenal amount that is spent, whereas some of this could really be invested into saying, look, developing your own building, you having your own infrastructure. So that's one way. Secondly, what would be necessary also, Natalie, I think, is to start developing some sort of public-private partnerships whereby the THA can invite persons, because at the end of the day, you have investors who are willing to make that, leap of faith and say, look, I'm willing to put my money in a project partnering with the government or with the THA for the greater benefit of all. So that would be another way that you can actually tap into the capital markets. Then I saw that the THA is looking to try and arrange a 300 million bond financing. And I think they also have to start looking to approach the international capital markets. But the point is, nobody is going to be lending you money if they find that you are not accountable and they find that you are consistently getting bad reviews from your Auditor General, your own Auditor General of TNT, who is consistently saying, hey, listen, you're not keeping proper books, you're not keeping proper records, there are several items missing in your reports. So therefore, that accountability, that's why I emphasize that, Natalie, that has to be the bedrock for the framework going forward.
Right, but are there any concerns, coming out of both camps when we look at the THA over the years, and as you said, that there always seem to be, bits and pieces missing from their records. And when you look at the political leader, when you look at the political leader of the PDP and the fact that I don't think the PSA has had any audited finances in the last couple of years either from either political parties, do you believe this will really become a reality?
Well, if you notice, I was very careful in my choice of words. I mentioned Farley Augustine, whom the PDP has said would be their choice for Chief Secretary if they were to win. So that's why I emphasize Mr. Augustine, because obviously I understand the merit in that question otherwise.
And your response?
Well, as I say, hopefully, if it is that they do move to a position where they are in a position to make a choice for Chief Secretary, hopefully they will stick to their word where they've said that it's Mr. Augustine. Because clearly, I think Mr. Duke does have some questions that people have raised in terms of, his stewardship of the PSA. And thankfully, Mr. Augustine does not appear to have those questions hanging over his head. But the point is, you want to see something new. You want to see some change in terms of that level of accountability. So in other words, even if the PNM were to be successful, I would hope that we would see that transition and that shift whereby they themselves would recognize the need to be more accountable to the public in terms of their stewardship of the THA. All right, there have been questions relating to this zipline project, and I'm not sure I was very happy or comfortable with the way it was handled on the platform. I saw at some points attempts to throw public servants under the bus, which I thought was most despicable. And then I later saw, I think the Prime Minister, in his reference to it, he said, well, he wants to see the zipline project go ahead. Yes, sure, we all want to see it go ahead, but don't gloss over the issue of what the Auditor General has raised and what might appear otherwise to be some question of accountability. Let's deal with that. Let's be honest. Let's be frank. Let's
you know what, Mr. George? I had Mrs. Tracy Davis Celestine here last week, and it's one of the issues I asked her about. And what she said to me is that the letter that the PDP has on the campaign trail, that was used on the campaign trail, that was a letter written to the THA, but by the time the audit itself was done, that everything was sorted out and there wasn't anything untoward. Because sometimes when you have an entire organization with so many documents, she did indicate that record keeping might not be the best. So sometimes you have to be looking at things, because you were talking about an audit report from 2016 that you had to be providing documents for several years after.
Well, the thing is, that answer, unfortunately, does not hold any water as far as I see it, because it's not just this one issue. The Auditor General over the years has consistently reported the THA as a failure in terms of its document keeping, its record keeping, its accountability, its producing the things that are required to show the justification for the expenditure of monies. So to blame this one incident and talk about something about documents missing, I mean, any sensible person analyzing and looking at the Auditor General's reports over the years. So we're not just talking about the Zipline project, over the years, and over the years of, I mean, if we want to put it, of the PNM's stewardship, there have been several reports whereby they have been criticized. So that answer that she gave certainly does not satisfy anything in regard to the previous reports.
And do you believe that that is one of the issues that the people will use to determine how they're going to vote today?
Well, the thing is, you see, if it is that the population, the electorate, decides that they want to see something different, then they have to make the decision as to, you know, do we want greater accountability in the THA, or do we want to basically say, look, let's hope that we get, you know, a piece of the pie. You know, it's like Black Stalin sang, you know, some years ago where he said, you know, you want piece of the action. So, and that really is the choice facing Tobagonians. Do we make a break with what has been happening and say, look, we want to see something different? And when I say see something different, I don't necessarily mean that it has to be a different political party. It could be a different way of doing things, even if the PNM were to win. Right? So in other words, we want to see that level of accountability, or do we want to say, well, look, things running, so let me see if I could get piece of the action, which unfortunately has been, I think, the main approach that many persons have taken in the past. But that's no way to develop a country, that's no way to develop a nation in the long term. It's unsustainable.
Right. And outside of accountability, what else does the business community want to see from the THA going forward?
Well, we would like to see a more open dialogue with them, and we would certainly like to see that they are more receptive to business ideas and a weaning of the population of this idea that you must get a THA job. I mean, it cannot be practical in any nation, in any island, in any country, Natalie, where your state sector is your largest employer, because that tells you one thing. Number one, it means that your business climate is either not developed or it's been stifled. Either way, that's never a good thing for the nation or for its growth. You look at all the prosperous nations in the world, it's by the individual entrepreneurs who've been encouraged, who've been facilitated, who've been nurtured, who've been given the tools to be able to flourish, and that then generates the greater economic activity. It can't all be state-sponsored. I mean, of course, we understand the rationale why they may have wanted it that way, because with that comes a certain level of control and manipulation. But at the end of the day, we must all be able to look at the bigger picture, what is best for Tobago and what is best for Trinidad and Tobago as a whole. And that has to be a development of a very healthy and robust business climate and business environment where entrepreneurs, and I mean, when I say entrepreneurs, I don't just mean persons from Tobago, I want to always be clear on this, Natalie. We would love to see entrepreneurs from Trinidad, we'd love to see entrepreneurs from overseas, from Europe, Canada, whoever, who would come with a good, sustainable business idea and have a climate where this is facilitated, where they can develop. Why can't we have, for instance, Natalie, sea turbines, whereby we use the wave action of our coastal waters to generate electricity? Why don't we have wind farms with wind turbines? You drive through Amsterdam, you drive through any part of Europe, you see these massive wind farms. In Germany, they have them, where you are harvesting the natural wind power. Why don't we have proper solar farms developed in Tobago? Why aren't these things developed and facilitated? And these are the ideas that we would love to see. But the point is, you need to have a governing body that is open, receptive, and facilitative and forward-thinking to be able to embrace these, even though they may not necessarily get the credit for it. You see, that's the problem with our politicians. They're all little tin gods, and they all want to stand up on a pedestal and beat their chest and say, well, yes, I did it, I did it. But at the end of the day, your role is to facilitate your nation's growth and development. It's not just to stand up, on a platform and collect a trophy and praise yourself.
All right, Mr. George, we do have to leave it there, but thank you so much for talking with us this morning. Let's hope that, as you said, even where the accountability is concerned, that we'll get that within the THA going forward.
At least, regardless of who wins.
Yes.
If I think we get that, that's a win for the island and the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you, Natalie. Have a good
You're
morning.
most welcome. Martin George, there, chairman of the Tobago Business Chamber, talking to us, and he says, regardless of what political party, he believes that both camps should be looking at accountability, because that's a serious issue that definitely needs to be addressed based on the reports over the years from the Auditor General. All right, we take a break and we'll be back with you.